Hi, everybody. It's Barry Chamish, and I'm sure we've got a good show. Look, Douglas Hawes is the first guest. He got his MA at San Jose State in modern European history. He turned that into a different kind of career, I guess. What we have here, research interests include underground secret history, military secret societies. That was published in Another Mirror. Druidic lineages from the UK. That was published in Paranoia magazine. Actually, I was published in Paranoia magazine about 20 years ago. Douglas, are you there?
Yes, I am, Barry.
Last question. Do you have a book called Secret History?
No, that I do have a post office box called Secret History in San Jose, California.
I don't think that'll do the trick. We'll figure out another way, okay? You can use the net with our listeners. So when that time comes, you'll be ready. All right, let's start with, my interest, first of all. You write here that you have studied intrigues to internationalize Jerusalem, and a name I've never heard of, Irvin Laszlo and Club of Budapest. I don't know what they are. Dive into this.
Okay. You have that Hungarian physicist named Irvin Laszlo. He has a PhD, I believe. He's quite an intellectual. And he was good friends with the founder of the Club of Rome, the Fiat executive Aurelio Pecci. And so he decided to form a group modeled on the Club of Rome dedicated to bringing together people from diverse spiritual backgrounds around the world. And that group is called the Club of Budapest.
All right. How does this relate to intrigues to internationalize Jerusalem?
Well, one of his top guys is the German chapter leader of the Club of Budapest, and that is Austrian-born academic Dr. Heinrich Eliyahu Benedict. And Heinrich Benedict splits his time between Europe and Jerusalem, where he founded the Jerusalem Peace Academy.
Such a thing exists?
It exists, yes. Jerusalem Peace Academy has an office and a headquarters. They want to make it into like an academy, bringing together religious teachers from all the religious traditions of the world. And he actually is called for the internationalization of Jerusalem. He has a 200-page long blueprint of how that would come about and what purpose that would serve. On the website, you can actually access it.
We will to your website, I promise you. But in the meantime, what's in this? I assume this is a blueprint. It sounds a little wacky, I got to tell you, but the world is wacky. Who knows? Maybe it's dangerous in some way. What's in this blueprint of his?
Well, he's basically, he says he's a rabbi, but he's also a teacher in the Vedanta Society, so he's very heavily influenced by Hinduism and Indian philosophy. So he's kind of a maverick. And he sees Jerusalem as fulfilling its divine purpose of being like a light to all the nations by becoming like an international spiritual capital for all of mankind.
That's super dangerous if you know the Israelis are in favor of something like that. Everyone knows Shimon Peres, what a monster he is. But you're talking about really dangerous Israelis are buying into this internationalism. I don't know who he is, but he's no rabbi. I'm going to say that right now.
Yeah. Well, he's the main thing I see about him is he's mainly focused in Europe, and apparently he only goes down to Jerusalem here and there. He's only spent like maybe 2 years living in Israel total, and his own website has not had any updating since around 2010. It's like it's on hold, or it's just not. It's stuck in the mud. It's not getting any momentum.
You're sure he's alive?
You know, to be honest with you, I have not double-checked that.
All right,
But,
there's a lot of weird stuff going on in Jerusalem. This is one I've never heard of, but internationalization is a concept adopted by very, very dangerous criminals in the Israeli political, upper Israeli political circles are buying into this.
Yeah, yeah. Right, and then you have the entire Muslim world pushing hard for Jerusalem being returned to the Muslim world, and
that's not the same as internationalized. That is very different than internationalized. Internationalized means Jerusalem has no Jew or Muslim anything. It's got some sort of rule from the world.
Well, in his position paper, Dr. Benedict says that if necessary, blue helmets of the UN will be needed to maintain the peace of an internationalized Jerusalem. That's actually quoted or mentioned in that position paper.
I don't understand that. What would these sissies from the UN do? I mean, what is he thinking? They become a real army? Or they're the peacekeepers of the Golan Heights. I'm very confused. It doesn't sound serious. But again, in this
his
world,
main backing is not coming from Israel. Apparently, he's stalled out there, but he's got some powerful backers, including Irvin Laszlo and a couple of U.S. State Department officials, and some folks in the United Nations in New York City are on his board of directors.
All right. Again, I've never heard of Irvin Laszlo. Who in the State Department is backing this? Anyone of significance?
There is some official, and I forget his title. To be honest with you, I wanted to focus more on some other tangents today, so I don't have all my in-depth notes about who's who in terms of the board of directors for the Jerusalem Peace Academy, but one important figure in the United Nations is one of the members of the board of advisors.
All right, what's his name? Her name?
That's the thing. I don't have my notes today for this particular part.
That's what you sent me, and that's what intrigued me. All right. Then away we go, but I want to know that was point one that you sent me. All right. What about the... All right. Here's a point that I think you're aiming for. The secret intrigues to create a caliphate. Is that what you're aiming for?
You know, to be honest with you, I can talk a lot about this one because this is one of the areas I've been working on in the last week.
We're all ears. What secret intrigues? By who?
Well, this is the thing. The Middle Eastern world is the hardest nut to crack in terms of creating a viable new world order. So I had this hypothesis I've been thinking of for several years of what if the covert clandestine services of a bunch of governments began to mastermind a covert clandestine effort to groom the leaders that would call for a caliphate and bring it about, and then they would secretly have an understanding with the Western elites that this is the deal. And then the Muslim street would be appeased because they want the caliphate on the Muslim street, but the Western elite would have a piece of the bargain.
And so, how would they get this peace?
Because the Muslim street is going increasingly in a kind of like fundamentalist tradition where they're longing for the caliphate. For instance, an example is what's happened in Turkey, where the politics have headed in an Islamic direction, and the old secular Turkey is unraveling. So
I wouldn't worry about that for the next few days. They really pissed off Russia. If you want to bring in Turkey, they did something makes no sense. Really makes no sense to bring down a Russian jet and then send troops to bring down a Russian helicopter trying to rescue the jet. I mean, this doesn't make sense. You want to talk Turkey, explain what happened there.
Well, it's hot breaking news. It only happened today, this morning, with the Soviet, I don't know if it was a fighter bomber, was shot down by a Turkish F-16. That's hot breaking news. And what I've read is the plane, the pilots and the pilot and the co-pilot were actually captured by Syrian Turkmen rebels and were killed.
That's what the issue is right now. Apparently, I'm getting the same news as you. I never heard of a Turkmen before, all right? They're not high up in my list of people to watch out for. So who are Turkmen? Why did they kill the two pilots? Where did the plane land? Let's start talking what I think we know is fact. I'm guessing, but this is how they're reporting it, that apparently a helicopter was sent to save the pilots and it was interfered with by Turkmen. All right, what's going on? And by the way, the Turkmen were on the Syrian side, not the Turkish side. There. Now sort that out.
Well, what's fascinating about Syria and also Lebanon and even Iraq, parts of Iraq, is there's a very complex ethnic mix where you have Druze, you have Armenians in the cities, you have Alawis, which are a heretical Shiite.
All right, fine and dandy. The Turks knocked down the Russian plane. The Turkmen apparently killed the pilot and co-pilot. Forget the fantastic maze in the Middle East. What is going on?
I don't know. I just know the Turkmens are a minority group and that lives in Iraq and in Syria. There are Turkmen groups, small numbers of Turkmens in both Iraq, northern Iraq, and also
I'm
in Syria.
guessing they're connected to Turkey, okay? I don't know this because I've never really looked into Turkmen, but a profound coincidence in their moniker and the fact that they killed the Russian pilot and co-pilot on the Syrian side, about 50 yards, they say, from the Turkish border. Now, let's put some logic into what happened here. Let's be first on this. How were they there fast enough to to get to the Russians and kill them?
Well, it is possible that the Turks have their own people in Syria. They have their assets, they have their spies, they have their military advisors, and the Turkmens are the logical people for them to go to first because they actually can speak Turkish. So and they'll be sympathetic to Turkey. So they're gonna. Some of those Turkmens are assets of the Turkish military covert clandestine community, and I would think they might even acted on orders of the Turkish military.
I would say they would have had to, unless this plane fell right on top of two armed Turkmen, and they decided the Russians should be butchered. Look, the story gets a bit complicated. They're Turkish-speaking Syrians who were on the scene to kill the Russians that the Turks knocked out of the sky. Look, this is you want to start a war. You want to tweak the nose of Russia. This sounds like the way, even better than a bomb on airplane over Sinai. This sounds like terrific tweaking.
Well, the Turks and the Russians have bad blood going way, way, way back. They fought like 4 or 5 wars. A lot of people remember that the Austrians fought a whole bunch of wars to drive the Ottoman Empire out of Europe, but the Russians fought even more wars. against the Ottoman Empire. And
You think
there
this
was
is
a
a
little bit of,
continuation of those wars, or is it something, I don't know, new? Just look, even if a Russian plane veers off course and goes 100 yards into your territory, you assume it's a mistake. You don't shoot it down. That's going to cause a major incident, and you sure as hell don't kill the crew. All right? All this happened, and I'm getting it as well. It's as new to me as you, but that's the scenario I'm getting. You don't think this is a really, really risky step?
oh, it's extremely dangerous. In fact, I've been thinking the last couple of weeks that the likelihood of a clash between the Russians and the Israelis is extremely high.
Oh, please. Netanyahu is on the phone with Putin, meeting Putin. They're working hand in hand.
Well, they're at odds with each other because
Oh,
the
you're reading newspapers now. You don't know Israel. You really don't. They're not at odds. They're plotting. That's the real problem. Netanyahu met Putin the night before Russia bombed Syria for the first time. I don't view that as a coincidence, and I don't believe Netanyahu said, don't bomb Syria, we like them.
Well, I'm just saying that even if they don't want to clash, what'll happen on the ground could inevitably force a clash. They might not want it. Just they're on opposite sides. I mean, the Russians want that Alawite government to stand. They have to support Hezbollah because Hezbollah is a prop of the Syrian regime, and the Israelis are mortal enemies of Hezbollah. There's going to be a clash, or it seems like to me there would be.
You made a big jump there. I don't know that Hezbollah and the Turkmens really have any relationship, but it's a mishmash going on. All right?
Oh, yeah.
There is no logic.
Complex. But back to the whole Turkey thing, the Turkish have a lot of old bad blood with the Russians. In World War I, they full-on fought a 4-year-long war, and a lot of it was a big battle front, and it went on to pretty much the duration of the war. And what a lot of people don't know is the Turkish military mobilized in World War II because when the Nazis and the Soviets formed the pact, the Turks got freaked out, and they turned to the British and the French, and the French had military advisors in Turkey in 1940. The Turkish army mobilized, and they were getting very darn close to having a clash with Russia in 1940. But that all changed when Hitler invaded Russia, and then Turkey all of a sudden was like, oh, okay, well, we can work with the Germans now because they're no longer allies with our hated enemies, the Russians. But in 1940, the Turkish army mobilized, and they had French military advisors in Istanbul, Ankara,
and you think this bad blood led to this incident this morning?
Well, the Turks don't want the Russians in any way to push them around, and maybe they were sending a message to the Russians.
You don't find it confusing that ISIS was trained and armed in Turkey, and they crossed the Turkish border initially into Syria and then to Iraq? You don't see that as the problem here?
Well, isn't ISIS equally a creature of like Saudi Arabian advisors?
It's a creature of American and Israel. They were trained in northern Jordan initially in 2011. And 3 years later, they took over half the Middle East, at least the northern part of the Middle East.
Well, Barry, one of the things regarding ISIS that I was buying into for a while, it turns out it appears to have been an elaborate hoax that the Islamic Republic News Agency of Iran created in July 2014. Have you heard about that? The supposed Edward Snowden leaked documents indicating that ISIS was a creation of Israel working with United States and British intelligence. And
believe me, that story, that leak is very, very true and very upsetting. In Israel, something called Debka, which claims to be a secret intelligence source, nonetheless, They reported exactly that, and they were shut down for 3 months and reemerged humbled.
Is that why they shut down? Because I noticed that they completely shut down and said, we're going to come out with a reconfigured website. I remember
they broke the fact that northern Jordan was a training ground for ISIS with the American Special Forces and Israeli Special Forces. They reported and they were shut down.
Wow. That's what happened. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they supported specifically the ISIS faction. They were.
Of course they did. They even called it ISIS. Look, this is it hasn't been that long. You know, it's been less than 3 years. They were funded, major funded. They were trained in Turkey. The Turks let them cross into Syria. You've got something going here. I'm not sure you're going beyond the surface here.
Well, I read this interesting article because I've been going with the Snowden leak story, and it includes this idea that the leader of ISIS is an actual trained actor and a Mossad asset, and some people say he's actually Israeli. And then when I read this article about the Snowden supposed hoax regarding what ISIS was about, I said, oh, that's just a whole hoax. This supposed Edward Snowden leaking this. So I'm actually kind of like still trying to sort this out. But
I'll bet you are. I'll bet you are. Look, what we're getting, and by the way, what I'm going to ask you later about what happened in the latest event in Paris, but we'll get to that. In the meantime, you've got to sort out that Turkey knocked down a Russian plane. The Russians are really being pushed to the edge. All right? I mean, they're being tweaked. Something really bad is heading like it hasn't already hit, but even worse, it's heading our way.
Yeah, I just go back to this theme that the Turks do not want the Russians to jack them around, do anything. Maybe they were sending the Russians a signal that do not cross our airspace ever, or because they have this bad blood with Russia going back
it wasn't to. Oh gosh! All right, fine. The Russians were not on the way to bomb or even to surveil Turkey. All right, they were sending military craft into Syria. It gets really very messy. All right. It looks, I'm not saying innocent. It was a military jet and was on the way to kill people, but nonetheless was innocent of trying to bomb Turkey.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So I just don't know. I just have to study the situation more. But I would just think it's maybe the Russians violated Turkish airspace, and they thought it was deliberate, and they were sending them a message.
And like Turkey can take on Russia. Russia can nuke them if it wants to. It's not a fair fight.
Well, they would think the United States, France, and Britain would back them up.
You know what? I'll bet the United States told the Turks to knock down a Russian plane. I don't think they would dare do it without that kind of... Look, oh gosh. Look, we have to take a 3-minute break, but while we're diving into the latest news, I'll bet America told the Turks to knock down the Russian plane. There, that's my opinion. We want to stir up the world. Let's do it. We'll be back in 3 minutes, folks. I'm going to plug me, and Douglas will plug him. And 3 minutes, I think we have an interesting discussion. This is Barry Chamish, Douglas Hawes. Yes, back.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
I know you all want answers, and believe me, so do I, and I'll do my best to get them.
Despite Nicolas Cage's promise to do his best to get left behind rapture answers for us, don't hold your breath. Not everyone believes Left Behind is true prophecy. Some may even regard as conspiratorial the mainstream re-release of the Left Behind movie with actor Nicolas Cage portraying the main character as an attempt to further reinforce in the minds of all this perception of false prophecy in order to condition the masses for the play about to begin. If you want true Bible prophecy answers, get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. The author exposes the Latin rapture origin, the 7-year tribulation deception, true Bible revelation of Daniel's 70 weeks, the abomination of desolation, the restrainer, America in the Revelation, the image of the beast and the mark of the beast, and the truth about God's chosen people, and so much more about Bible prophecy. This book will shatter the Left Behind paradigm of future events. Get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity, invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.
Hey folks, you know you get all my books at lulu.com, www.lulu.com. You'll see a search box right in my last name, Chamish, Chamish. That'll take you to all my books. David Samron is still running www.barrychamish.com. And Douglas, if you want people to get a hold of you, how?
Well, best is to write, and that address is Secret History, P.O. Box 1251, San Jose, California, 95108. Also
That's
have an email address.
So old-fashioned. You don't have a website, something a little faster?
You know, I need to get one of those up and running. I really do. I want to blog, and I need a venue, and I need to get one of those rolling. But I also have an email address, and that's dhawes2002@yahoo.com.
You have to spell Hawes.
That is DHAWES 2002
at yahoo.com. All right, let's go back. Well, we have to, you sent me a letter about events in Paris. Now, I'm very confused by this culture we're in anyways. You know, they've got a holiday this week celebrating Afro-American culture in America.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
You know,
I know Kwanzaa's in December, isn't it?
No, it's called Black Friday.
Well, Black Friday, that's the shopping free-for-all right after
Oh,
Thanksgiving.
is that what it is? All right. I was going to celebrate Marvin Gaye getting two intrigues at the same time, Marvin and homosexuals, but all right, I'll change my plans then. Let's go to Paris. There was an American punk band. This is what did intrigue me a lot. What was it? The heavy metal
Eagles of Death at the Bataclan Theater, and that was the single most just terrible part of the tragedy that unfolded in Paris, where the attackers went in there.
Equal number wounded. No one got their money back on the tickets. Yeah, it was terrible. All right, let's dive into this, the real thing. You say it happened on Friday the 13th. You're saying that they targeted this something of death punk rock for unusual. Of all the events, this was the big one.
Well, there's two ways to look at this. It could just be like they know that the whole thing of in the Muslim mindset, the West is basically a corrupt, decadent culture and world, and so why not attack on a day which is in the superstitious Western mind is like a symbol of horror and destruction and death, Friday the 13th, bad luck, and particularly to target this mass casualty attack on that day. However, there's another way to look at it.
When the death band is playing. All right, let's not leave that out.
Yeah, death metal band, yeah. There's another way to look at it, though, and that is that on Friday the 13th, 1307, the King of France called for the arrest of hundreds of the Knights Templar, and all across France, Knights Templar were arrested. And this event has become popularized in recent novels, including novels by Dan Brown, for instance, as the reason the legend of Friday the 13th as an unlucky day has emerged. There's certainly a lot of debate about the real origins of Friday the 13th, but it is an interesting theory that put forward most fairly recently, that Friday the 13th goes back to this day where the Knights Templar were crushed in France by the King of France, who was jealous of their power. And 7 years later, the Grandmaster of the Knights Templar went through this terrible, slow torture death over roasting coals on March 18, 1314. So there was bad blood between the Knights Templar and the King of France, the royal tradition. And Albert Pike, he was this prominent Freemason in the United States, very interesting figure. He was also a brigadier general in the Confederate Army during the Civil War. But as a Freemason, he wrote this monumental book called Morals and Dogma of the Ancient and Deceptive Scottish Rite in 1871. It's basically a Bible for Scottish Rite Freemasonry, which is the higher degree Freemasonry, along with the York Rite. But in that book, Pike says that the reason Louis XVI was executed during the French Revolution was the revenge that the Knights Templar finally were able to unleash on the royal dynasty, on the King of France. It took them 400 years, almost 500 years, but they finally got their revenge.
And you're saying Muslims who attack a punk rock death band are aware of this?
Well, that's the thing. I don't believe it. It could just be a very interesting alchemical coincidence. It could mean I don't think it's what's the backstory of it. It would have to be like a high-level, covert, clandestine controlling group within ISIS that decided to pick Friday the 13th based on some esoteric occult tradition tied into the Knights Templar. I'm just throwing it out there. I don't believe it personally.
I'm not sure you shouldn't dismiss. I wouldn't dismiss everything. All right. The fact that of Friday the 13th, what hit me was the heavy metal death band. That's what they focused on. They were going to shoot up a soccer match and a few restaurants, but they got this concert. Well, it was a slaughter. And I'm not sure that what you are dismissing right now may not have more than a grain of truth. There was planning.
Well, one thing I found in research just today is Muslim radicals had targeted the Bataclan Theater. It had been in their crosshairs for a long time, and that's because the owners of the Bataclan Theater were two Jewish brothers, Pascal and Joel Lalo, and they owned the Bataclan Theater for more than 4 decades. They were very public in their support for Israel, but they sold it in September 2015, this 2 months.
I believe they moved to Israel after they sold it. I've been receiving this as well. I don't know what to make of it, but I'd say that may have been part of it. But having a death band is the ultimate irony of a terrorist act.
Well, it goes in the whole grain of like attack, the whole thing where they attacked Charlie Hebdo, which in fact did have very graphic and pornographic insults against Mohammed, right? And they targeted Charlie Hebdo, and then going after a death metal ban as like a symbol of just this perverse Western culture. And of course they think in the Muslim mindset, they think they are the righteous of God, and everybody else is apostate and has got it all wrong.
Well, you're writing about the demi-monde of Paris. The New Yorker did that a few months ago, that Paris has a demi-monde, an underworld of a couple million people, Muslims, who are outside French society, and they're making Paris a very, very dangerous... Well, it's not the same city anymore.
Right. If you talk to French people, going way back, they've been freaked. A lot of French people have been very angry about what's been happening to France going back decades. I remember when I was in France way back in 1990, I got jumped on a subway train in Lille by some Algerians who were obviously drinking, and they were angry. You could just tell they were just bitter and angry, and I made the mistake of looking one of them in the eye across the subway car, and that guy followed me out, and these guys tried to jump me, and filled with anger, and they're basically déclassé. They're decultured. They're not fitting in the French society, but they're also lost their own traditions. So they're in this strange world where they just are kind of like lost in a drift.
Now, this existed before the refugees, so people understand the refugees may be adding to the demi-monde, but this was part of Paris, and it was simmering. It seems to have exploded, but again, nothing is what it seems.
Well, I heard that some of the people that were active in Paris in this broader plot were basically alcohol, pot-smoking type people that were just basically not observant Muslims at all, but living in this subterranean demi-monde of the pot-smoking, the drinking,
you forgot sex. Apparently,
and the sex, yeah.
They liked sex clubs, and in short, they were not doing it for Allah. They may have Allah Akbar, but they were not observant of Allah.
Yeah, and I guess, anyway, so absolutely true. So,
well, look who they were. I mean, they captured them. By the way, none were French nationals. They were Belgian. All right? Just so you know. They crossed the border. They plotted in Brussels. And there was only one refugee from Syria amongst the lot. That's what we've been told.
Yeah. So, where should we go next?
Oh, I don't know. I hear that Helsinki is very pretty. Maybe it's safe. Other than that, what do you mean where? There's a worldwide travel alert. You've got them scared on every continent now.
Yeah, and there was that pretty much extremely high alert in Brussels just a day or two ago, where they thought another large attack was imminent, and the city was in a complete lockdown, I guess, in just the last 24, 48 hours.
It's been 3-4 days, actually, and Paris has been close to 2 weeks. They can intimidate. You know, all the leaders say they cannot intimidate us. Boy, what a bunch of crap. They are great at intimidating you. All right? They've got the world. Well, yeah?
You know, we have a lot of Muslims in the United States, but one of the, I guess, blessings the United States has is we have a large number of Arab Christian refugees from the Muslim world, and they actually outnumber Arab Muslims. I have a friend who's Lebanese Maronite Christian, and she was an exile from the civil war in Lebanon and had to live in Saudi Arabia and Nigeria, and she's adamant in her opposition to the jihadists. I mean, she's like one of the most,
what about the other half aren't Lebanese Christian? All right, let's be realistic here. Fine, you got a bunch of Christians. What about the other half who are Muslim?
Well, that's the thing. The half that is Muslim in this country, and I think Arab Muslims are a relative minority, are from other countries like Afghanistan. There's a lot of Afghan Muslims, and
there's a lot of Iraqis, lots and lots.
Pakistanis, yeah. Iranians. We have a lot of Iranians.
You don't think your security services are a little concerned about this community?
Well, absolutely. I mean, because we do have full-on radical mosques and little enclaves in places like Dearborn, Michigan, and Newark, New Jersey, and even in New York City, there's like a significant radical mosque infrastructure. I remember reading an article by one of the prominent moderate Muslim leaders, and they're usually allied with the Sufi orders, and he in a newspaper article said, you know, we're outgunned in the United States. The radicals control the mosque structure, and we have our mosques, but we're outgunned, and we are in a rearguard action against the radical-dominated mosque structure in the United States. And this was like a moderate Muslim leader based in the San Francisco Bay Area, but he was like a national leader. But in the moderate factions of Islam.
Well, there's your worry. Look, ideology. You know, I have a friend in from Israel. I spoke to her on the phone yesterday. She's giving me the stuff about we're stabbing Jews to get our 72 virgins. And I mean, this stuff is 50 years old. These terrorists, there are many women who could not care less about the 72 virgins. What you've got is ideology. They're not afraid to die. They think they're going to be welcome into something better. If this ideology makes you fearless, you've got a problem.
Yeah, and if it's only just 3 to 5% of the youth in the Muslim world that think this way, out of a population of well over 1 billion, you're talking about tens of millions of people, that drawn to that thinking.
How about stirred up into that thinking?
Kind of thinking?
All right.
What's that?
How about stirred up into that thinking? I'm going back to the creation of ISIS, which caused this muck. All right? Up till then, Syria, fine, was in a minor civil war. That was it. There was a lot of stirring up here. This is a finely orchestrated war scenario.
Right. Well, it started with the Libyan civil war, Debka file in 2011, right after the Benghazi uprising, the initial protests. Immediately, like 2 days later, said Qatari, Jordanian, and Saudi special forces are on the ground in Benghazi. This is like 2 days after the protest started out, so it's orchestrated. I mean, you can't have special forces on the ground in 2 days after a protest.
Suddenly you wake up and American jets are bombing Gaddafi. What did he ever do to America? You know, look, this is a weakness of this joker running for president, that she watched her ambassador on live TV without rescuing him in Benghazi. It's really the Achilles heel here, and it's being ignored. But this is a fine tune somebody is orchestrating.
Some people said that Gaddafi was pushed out because he was threatening to take his reserves out of U.S. currency and putting it somewhere else.
Nonsense. What we've got is something beyond America. The French bombed him too. There was a decision made to stir up Libya. It was stable under him. All right? People were prosperous. Now they got what they want. You have a complete civil war and a complete breakdown of all morality. You get what you want. Why do you think Israel pulled out of Sinai and the West Bank? Not to replace them with something better, but to stir things up. The stirring is, I'm worried that the stirring will overflow into our lives in a big, big, big way, and soon.
Well, it's already happening to Europe, where the stirring up has led to 1 million refugees, mainly Syrian, but a lot of Libyans also have gotten into Europe, and all the tragedy of the people in boats, where the boats are sinking.
And you really think that if Europe had closed its borders, these boats would be setting off? Look, it's all right. Whatever you say. All right, it's closer to 2 million, as I understand it, and they were allowed in.
Yeah, and they're overwhelmed. But I was just saying, in contrast, the United States has some things going for its advantage. One thing is, up until recently, the rough about 50% of the Muslims in the United States are actually African American Muslims, so they're actually Americans. And some people even...
You think that's going for the United States? This is some sort of advantage?
Well, they are Americans, so this is their home. It's better than having people that don't speak our language and don't understand anything about our culture except through TV.
I'll bet you the terrorists in France spoke French and understood the culture well. They may have found it contemptible, but they understood it.
Well, but the recent waves of people that are completely unassimilated has been just overwhelming. Just the numbers of people that are not assimilated at all. And then that's probably been going back 10, 15 years, like what's happened in London, where there's entire neighborhoods of basically controlled by Sharia enforcers, and probably the police don't want to go in those neighborhoods. Same thing in Malmo, Sweden, and that neighborhood in Brussels. There's a neighborhood in Brussels ruled by Sharia law. It's like 60,000 people live in this one neighborhood. I have the name of it here.
Oh, it's okay. I'm not planning to visit. I don't think any of the listeners are either. All right. In short, you're saying that Muslims have their own neighborhoods. Surprise, surprise.
84,000 in Saint-Jean-Molenbeek in Brussels. That's outrageous. 84,000. Sharia law basically reigns supreme in that enormous neighborhood in Brussels.
All right, that's, as I said, there's a Muslim neighborhood in Brussels. The plot was hatched on Paris from Brussels. Just, look, we initially thought they were French. It turns out it was a little more complicated. How do you get over the border? If you're carrying out a terrorist attack, how do you get the weapons over the border? There are lots and lots of questions that have not been answered if this was a Brussels-led terror attack on Paris.
Or some sort of high-level conspiratorial decision to stir up the hornet's nest for whatever broader agenda is.
Well, the French are getting the Israeli treatment. Israelis are terrified to walk out their door, afraid they'll be stabbed in the street. All right, the French are afraid to leave their house, eat at a restaurant, afraid they'll be blown up. Everyone's getting it.
Which could lead to calls for more global security cooperation and a world security state, as in that new James Bond movie, which is one of the themes of Spectre, the new James
Goldfinger?
Bond movie. No, the newest one, Spectre. The whole intrigue is there's a secret.
Sean Connery is still making movies? That's amazing.
This is now, what's his name? Gordon Craig, or I forget what his name is. The new face of James Bond.
Oh,
but he's fighting an international conspiracy to create like a world security state, where all the intelligence agencies of the world are under one management.
And
very
who would be managing
and very
it?
timely.
It wouldn't be the UN, would it?
Ultimately would have to be part of the UN structure, at least in
all
name.
Right. Well, it's been I did see Dr. No. I think that was the last James Bond movie I saw, and I think that was like 50 years ago. So I'm not sure what you're talking about. But if anyone's worried, we're going to have an international security state coming up next, where the caliphate, according to what you wrote me, is going to be controlled by the global elite. That one sounds pretty easy to swallow. I think it might be even worse.
Well, they have to somehow co-opt the Middle East. There's some of us that are into the prophecy game, and there's always the talk about
this is not prophetic, what's going on. You have to dig real hard to find that this is prophetic. What you've got right now is a fine-tuned act of evil, and it's stirring up the world, and lots of people are homeless and dying. And if people don't wake up, it'll continue until I'm worried where it's going to continue till. And believe me when I say this, that is not prophetic. That's evil ruling. All right, folks, this is Barry Chamish. I'll be back in 7 minutes with Martin de la Sengel. Different interview, this one from Europe. Thank you, Douglas. I enjoyed that.
You're welcome.
Folks, we'll be back in 7 minutes.